Welcome to the Lean by Design podcast, the show that explores the relationship between people and workflow design within the life sciences industry. I'm your host, Lawrence Wong, and my co-host is Oscar Gonzalez. Join us as our guests tell inspiring stories that have shaped their careers and deliver tips to help you work smarter and become lean by design. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Lean by Design. I'm your host, Lawrence, and I'm here today with Oscar. Implementing new digital technologies can be challenging for any organization. You recently spoke at a conference on this very topic and offered some insight on how to approach this. Could you tell us more about that fireside chat?
So, October, I was asked to present at a fireside chat at OTNI 2022, which stands for Outsourcing Clinical Trials New England. So in this particular conference, there's a number of vendors that are really looking at the full spectrum of clinical trials, from the laboratories, from regulatories, from the clinical startup, from closeout to submission of regulatory documents, to where your samples are stored, just every aspect of clinical trials. And I was asked to prepare a chat of sorts. This was initially a panel, but we trimmed it down to a fireside chat on, really whether or not we're prepared for this digital transformation. And it took me a little bit of time to think about what that's actually asking. But as you see the development of not only just R&D, but into the clinical space, there's so many different software and programs that are becoming available to us. And sometimes it's hard to weed through that and say, what should I go into? And, there's, if you Google anything from the perspective of, clinical trial software, to help make our trials successful, every single software company is going to tell you that their product will make your trial successful. You have to have that visibility into a number of factors to figure out if that particular software is something that you're going to go into. And I know you do a lot of work in manufacturing, operations, engineering, but I'm sure it's the same thing. There's a lot of stuff out there, and it's hard to sometimes take a step back and ask yourself, wait, what are we actually trying to do here? Yes, we want to enroll patients and get to, a positive primary endpoint, but that there's so much more beyond that. There's so much more that actually leads into that, and having a, clear view into that, can help you figure out what direction your organization needs to go into. Have you seen a number of items within your space as well?
Yeah, I think the latest, I would say, trend that a lot of companies are looking into are IoT devices. So the Internet of Things. They have these little devices that you can attach onto your equipment, and the premise is that you can, slap one of those things on. It connects to either Wi-Fi or some other communication protocol, and it's measuring the current draw from the wall. You're looking at maybe the vibration for any rotating equipment, and that data gets sent up to a cloud where there's an analyst who looks at it and then prescribes some sort of recommended service that you want to do on that particular piece of equipment. Now, I think the thing that happens is that you run into an issue with, okay, I have a lot of things I want to put sensors on. I can't put it on all of them, right? So how do you decide, where to place your bets on, okay, we're going to get the most bang for your buck, doing it on these things versus something else, which is great. But I think not enough people look at it from like what you mentioned before, right? Like what is actually missing? Because you may maintain something completely fine and you don't have any issues. So why would you put a sensor on it? Right.
It's funny because it makes me think of, growing up, whenever my dad had to take the vehicle to, the car to get service done or what have you. And we did oil changes. I've learned how to do oil change since I was like 12 years old because we would just do it in the driveway. And I can't do it now because my driveway sloped, so that might actually get kind of messy. But, it was astounding to me to see that just one or two little things in terms of, doing a tune-up every so often and changing your oil can often offset any kind of issues that you would see in the long run. And I think sometimes we get comfortable when things are just running. There's so many pieces of equipment. Oh, I have a lab manager. Well, the lab manager is just making sure that everything is stocked, everything is running. But in terms of the preventative measures, usually, I find that people don't spend money or resources on preventative measres, and it turns around to bite them in the butt. So it's that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's I will say that just because you can doesn't mean you should.
That's true.
So I think for some of these technologies, because if you're not aware of the cost of not only paying for, so I think most companies now do a subscription base where you pay monthly on whatever technology it is.
Yeah.
Either it's some software or hardware component. But there's a cost, right, to implementing such a technology. But if you don't actually look at what that's going to take and you sign up for something that you're not completely aware of, you may just, make it even more painful for what you're currently doing than actually helping out your operations.
You're exactly right. And that's part of the point that I touched on in this fireside chat. The first question that was posed to me was, how do we decide what to invest in with all of these different components that are available? And every year, everything, there's new things that are coming out. You go to a conference and there's either a new company with a new product or an old company with new services and new offerings, and it becomes almost overwhelming because they don't all necessarily talk to each other. So to your point, you don't necessarily want to have sensors from 6 different companies that are feeding your information, because now they all have different algorithms. They come from different software makers, and so it may not be apples to apples. And one of the things that I strongly recommend for folks to do is to really look at what is in their digital asset toolkit. What are those assets that you are using on the day to day, and look at those, understand what is the goal of that asset, what does it give you, what doesn't it give you, and paint yourself a picture of what you're missing. Because a lot of times we'll say, well, we need more granular data in this space space ABC. Well, it may not actually be the data. The data may actually already be there. You just haven't utilized the asset that you already have to provide that information to you. What companies tend to not really promote is their digital strategy, if they have one. And that's honestly to help the organization guide the organization into a direction initially of this is where we want to go with all of our data. And it helps to drive the influx of that data in a way that favors the company goals. So to your point, when you go to look at a new asset or new software, a new program, there's a nice little checklist or outline of things that you can look at, such as, what impact is this going to have on your function or on the organization? Is this going to be a new workflow, or is it going to be replacing an old one? What value is this asset going to bring? Are there going to be barriers? What is the user experience like? What is the trainings and the documentation? What are the barriers in transferring? A lot of these things that we are so ingrained in, and I don't know how much experience you've had in hospitals, but there tends to be very old software in hospitals, and you can see sometimes you're asking, is this a DOS system? And it's usually because these entities are so large that the expense to just update from a Windows 10 to a Windows 11 operating system, plus all of the software, just becomes so astronomical, it doesn't make sense to actually make that jump. And then also, there should be some expected return on investment. You shouldn't have to, if we're utilizing these things in the right way, it should be giving us time back, whether time back from sifting through reports. We can actually just, pull out a summary, really quick to see any major changes in our milestones or in, some of these target numbers that we're looking at. But it's important to examine these things. And what happens a lot of times is I think that we try to, run with this, oh, it looks so cool. Oh, because guess what? These salespeople, they're good at what they do. They make you salivate and go, oh, I wish my data would look like that. Let's sign on the dotted line and be done with it. And unfortunately, that is definitely not the way to go. And I've seen it play out multiple times where you just sign it quickly and you get the system in and the software, the program falls flat on its face. And who do we blame? The vendor. They didn't set it up well. They didn't train it well. There's a lot of things that we can talk about that in a little bit. But, I think those things that you can kind of checklist off are really going to put you in a position to understand, does this make sense to be a part of this function, to be a part of this department, to be a part of this organization? Who else should I be considering? Because unfortunately, we do not bring in the right people when it comes to these things. We look at, there's one person, there's one group, and they want software X. So they're going to bring a couple people into a demo just to show them what it looks like, but they've already made their decision that they're going to buy it. They just want to show people what it looks like, when it should be the other way around. They should get feedback. What are we missing? What else, prior to going out and looking for softwares and new, digital assets.
Yeah, I so back to your point about, people gravitating towards the latest shiny thing. It's like, oh, wow, it's really cool. We should sign up and use it. And, they have these hopes of it, magically changing how they work at whatever operation they do. But in reality, we should really be thinking about, okay, take a look at your process. Where are the bottlenecks and where's the variability? And then maybe take a look at where the technology kind of fits in there. And if it is indeed going to help you, bring your operations to the next level, yes, you should look at that and perhaps maybe run a pilot, like making smaller bets before you sign on the dotted line and commit to doing like a year-long contract or something like that, where you dig yourself into a hole that you can't get out of.
And, I think what's most important too is that we, and I say we as in the client, need to understand that these companies, these vendors, do not understand the intricacies of the operations at our organization. We have to walk them through because they're building something, hey, this is how everything should work, based on our vision, based on our, our mission and whatnot with the company. But when you integrate software and things like that, it also changes the workflows. And sometimes it affects the culture in a certain way of, oh, we're more, we do more on spreadsheets versus, different softwares, or we use all softwares and we get reports that come out through an Excel or through another reporting system. You have to really carry that, software, that organization, that company with you, so that they understand how it is at your organization, so they can find the best way to integrate that. I think a lot of times it's, we see these offers from, business development leaders and the like, and hey, we can come in and train your team, and we're busy. We'll take care of that. Well, there's also a reason that they want to come in there, because they want to kind of test the room and not just look at, okay, this is one person in one department of a company of 500 people. Am I going to build out, the strategy to help them implement this based on this one person's feedback? And that's, one of the things that people tend to ask is, how do we make sure that these things are successful? Well, I've always said, I heard this a while ago and I cannot remember where, but I would definitely give credit as soon as I can point out when I heard this. But there are three people when it comes to new technologies, and sometimes you'll see this almost normalized graph, which represents early adopters, the general population, and then people that are late into the game. And there's a couple of segments of people there, and your idea is that you want to be able to capture the largest group of people. And this is when you're doing some sort of like product launch in a company or something like that. But this is the same way, just kind of in reverse when it comes to eliciting a new technology. And oftentimes you'll find yourselves with those early adopters that are, man, super jazzed up, so excited. Oh, this is great. I saw this before. I wanted us to get it. I'm excited. Let me know what I can do. Then you have another group that looks at it, understands the value, but they're just too busy. And sometimes, these will be the senior managers, directors, maybe level of VPs. And then you'll find another, section of folks that are just, not interested because they, in biotech, there's a method to the madness. Everyone has some sort of strange little combination of actions that they run to perform part of their work. Oh, I extract this and then I run a filter and then I pass that filter over into this sheet. And then this sheet creates a metric and then that metric goes into a dashboard. This very long, laborious space. These people are interested, but they say they don't have time. If I could show them how this is going to give them back time or how this is going to help alleviate some of the work that they're doing, that within combination of, that's already 66% of the group of folks that you're going to find at your organization. And the other ones, I promise you, if you do this the right way, they will come organically. I have had people that were kicking and screaming, not wanting to do anything, new because it's going to change everything. How are we going to do this? And first thing they do is they start asking questions. Well, how do we do this? Well, how do we do that? Well, how will this happen? Well, how will that happen? You can't answer the question to everything because you need to also, kind of build the structure of what it's going to look like and then say, okay, this is what we have. I was able to fix, 7 of 10. I think this is a good space for us to start. And so when you have that level of adoption from those initial 60%, the organic implementation that occurs will slowly bring those people in. And I've had those people after 5 or 6 months come back and say, this is awesome. And I love it. And it makes things easier. And I don't have to go around chasing for stuff because I see it here all the time as it's being updated.
We'll be right back after a quick break.
Thank you to our sponsor, Perna Communications, a Boston-based digital communications firm for life sciences, healthcare, and mental health companies. Life science companies have an important story, but it's not always easy with the industry jargon. Lauren and her team turn your technical talk into compelling content that feels authentic to your brand and resonates with your audience. If you need help with your digital content or copywriting, visit laurenperna.com to learn more about how they can tell your company's story. Have you bumped into anybody when you've worked with other technologies of people that just really didn't want to do any of the new stuff?
So not so much. So I think for a lot of people that I've talked to, especially on the management side, they have shiny object syndrome, right? Like, hey, this is new technology. Like, it looks awesome. Like, we should definitely use it. But what I find...
That's interesting. Shiny object syndrome?
Yeah.
SOS. It actually means help.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But I will say that, on to your question before, how can we ensure success of digital transformation? I actually looked at that question from the vendor side of things. Like, how can they help the client get to where they want to be by understanding where they are now, right? Like, I don't think that there's enough time spent on, do you actually need this technology in the first place? Because I think from a vendor side, you don't want a bunch of people on your platform that aren't using it, right? Like, you want people to be engaged on the platform and be using it and to have these transactions on the platform so they can find value out of it. So I would say that, especially in the manufacturing space, there is a lot of instruments and data already being pulled from a lot of this equipment, and that people don't know what to do with the data and to make decisions based off of some of the trends that they're seeing. So that's where I've seen issues come up. Not so much, hey, should we even use this? It's more of, yes, let's use it. But then once you use it, and then you have all this data or metadata over the processes that you're running, then what do you do, right? What's kind of the next step? And I think there needs to be more work on, what is the actual roadmap from when you implement the technology? How do we know that it is successful? What are you measuring to tell you that, yeah, we did a great job? Because I think a lot of companies just, sign the dotted line, and then you have a bunch of training, people use it, but then nobody knows did this actually help us or is it now hindering us?
When we fail to actually take the time to listen and to dig deeper to see what are those other metrics, what are those other things that this software can do, until then, can we open our minds and realize, okay, this is going to show us a whole part of our operations that we never even considered was a factor as to why we were delayed or why we are not consistent in the delivery. And, I think it is important, from the vendor standpoint, because it gives them an opportunity to build that relationship as well. If they think, how can I make this group successful rather than let me just sell them a product, guess what? They will come back and come back and come back. And as you and I are aware of, one of the most powerful tools in marketing for a vendor, a company, software such as what we're talking about is third-party word of mouth. If you get people to understand, hey, we had this big problem and they helped us set it up and they helped us, and they looked at our operations and they found a way to integrate this into our systems. And because of that, it allowed us to, really be successful with these things. On top of those, it's so important and almost critical to have that executive sponsor level, because if this is an initiative that kind of just sits at the functional level, there's just a couple, individuals, but there's no real communication with, perhaps a senior director or a VP level or, something like that you can have this, transformative discussion, that you can give these updates and say, hey, look, this is something that we've looked into. These are the problems that we have at our organization. We have looked into a multitude of softwares and the like, and this is where we think we're going to go, because that executive leadership is going to be the one to continue to pull this into the executive team at large, right? And so they will have that opportunity to discuss, oh, this is what we're doing with this software. Oh, this is what we've understood that we didn't understand before about our company and the trials we run and the assets that we have and the R&D that we're doing. And that's, I think, super critical, because the implementation of these things will not be successful if you shove it down people's mouths. But when you show them data after data after data as to why something has been benefiting the organization, the adoption of this becomes organic, and it's more of a curiosity. And that's what you want out of an organization. You want people to be curious and say, let me test this out. And don't take this, to be the Bible. Look at this system, work on it. Tell me what you don't like. I will take that to the my point of contact for that particular software. It's important to see that, and it's important to know that, so that you also know, where else can we grow from here if this software isn't it? In 5 years, what would it take for us to change into something that fills all of these voids that we're finding now in year 1 or year 2? So it's super critical to have that sponsorship.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more about just talking to the teams before you actually implement something. And I also think that on the vendor side, the trainings that you hold with the customers that you have onto the platform, those should be tailor-made to what the customer is doing at their operation, and not some, blanket training that it blows my mind sometimes. You have some of these vendors come in and they try to explain something, and it's all
for
about
4 hours,
yeah.
4 hours, 6 hours.
And then you ask them like, oh, what was what is this? Where are your customers predominantly? And they're like, oh, they're in oil and gas, and it's like this is not the same thing as oil and gas, and that you have to tailor some of
Right.
these functions and the wording that you're using to make it more digestible for the life sciences community. I think is huge.
Right. And, it's funny you say that, because one of the tools that I use whenever I'm trying to get people to adopt a new software or something that I feel can really improve the work that they're doing and make things better is I will take their data and create sort of a sandbox version and say, okay, here's your data, here's how it looks. And once I start to show them that, they go, wow, like that took 5 minutes. That usually would take me 2 hours. And so that's the whole point of it, is that you need to appeal to their emotion. And that is something that we are emotional beings. Humans are emotional by nature. I sometimes maybe I don't have enough emotion, but I will say you can tug on my heartstrings when you're hitting every pain point that I've been discussing. So when you can show me my work and show me what that's going to look like in this new space, it changes the ballgame for me.
Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, to that point, one of the other questions that was asked is, who is responsible for delivering efficiencies? Is it on the technology side? Is it the end user? Is it more of the executive sponsor? What were your thoughts on that?
It's interesting because when that question came up, there was a mixed bag. And, I looked and it was just me with a microphone. I said, does anybody have an idea? And everyone said both. And where I do see where they're coming from, I actually disagreed with the crowd and told them that it is our responsibility as the client, because the vendor doesn't work for us. They don't know our culture. They don't know our operations. They don't know our workflows. They don't know us. We know people on our team. We know what people would and would not do. We know what we have as other assets in the company. And if something comes in and half of what they're showing us is something we already have, you're probably just going to be throwing money down the toilet. We have to really take the onus on us. And part of making that successful transition is having your champion. You have to have, you could call it your functional champion, your digital champion, somebody at your organization that owns that software, that owns what the training is like. They should know. I had a really fantastic opportunity at one of my previous roles when I went from being a lab manager to being a program manager in clinical operations. I really didn't know what I was doing from the clinical aspect. I also didn't know what a program manager did. But when I was given that opportunity and I found a software that was creating cloud-based timelines, showing that to my boss, who happened to be a C-level executive. So right there, I had a good connection with a executive sponsor. He looked at me and said, if we do this, you have to know more about this software than anybody in this company. And at that point, he said, I will send you to the conferences if you need to go. I will make sure that you have the training, but you need to be the person that knows this more than anybody in this company. And so from these opportunities, if you see something that you can change, do the homework to talk to the right people so that you can bring this into the organization. Oh, I don't want to be the point person. Why not? Why not? That's building the opportunity. It's building visibility. And dare I say, it's building job security, because now you are the expert in that space at that company, and people will come to you. And yes, it can be a lot of work. But when you're good at how to get around and you're good at how to train people, because that's the thing, don't take this opportunity and say, okay, well, I'm just going to show people what they're asking for and then make them go away. Turn it into a training. Hey, I'm going to show you this so that next time you know exactly how I did this. It is up to us to make sure that it's successful. Yes, bring the software company, the digital asset company, bring them with you along the way. Make sure they know what's going on, because they're going to want to help you too. Hey, do you have any slides that show XYZ? Any other material that I can show, because I'm going to do a lunch and learn, whatever the case is. But we need to look past just signing the agreement, getting the upload, and saying, okay, we'll talk to you in 3 months and let you know how it's going. You need to be on top of that. And so being that, that champion, I think is so critical, because part of your role and part of your personal development also will be to understand the new technologies and to be able to drive that within the organization. You don't have to be a techie person, but if you're in data management, regulatory, clinical operations, pharmacovigilance, and you're finding these softwares that are perfect for what you're doing in your function and could really alleviate a lot of things, take that opportunity as an opportunity to, really take the organization, take the function to a level that it wasn't at before, and be proud of that.
Yeah, I think that question was kind of a trick question, because obviously, everybody is responsible for the successful implementation of the whatever software, hardware, technology that you're trying to implement. I think from a management point of view, I think there needs to be an alignment between both the champion of the technology from your own company, but also the vendor to understand, okay, realistically, how much time are we going to allow people to adopt this new technology, and then allowing people to carve out times in their schedules to learn how to use it. I've seen times where, you have a new software come in, and then the management expects just a snap of a finger that everybody is magically going to learn how to use this. And that's really not the reality. It takes time for people to change the way that they work, to come up with new procedures, to ask the right questions, to attend group trainings.
And not only that, it right, and part of that whole calendar of events, they need to also understand when is this relevant to me, because usually when you're going after these certain softwares, you have a group right here in the middle of that bullseye that it's going to affect immediately right away. Then you have these different groups that are just outside of that immediate team, that eventually it will come into their workflows. And so when I talk about how you implement these things, it's not necessarily about making sure that you train everybody. It's, making sure that you are keeping people in the know and making them aware of, and when I say people, it's those that are in that first that first node of departments and functions, and then maybe that second node. But obviously, if you're, coming in with a new technology on how to manage, of digital data management, you're not going to go directly to the legal team and say, hey, we want to show you guys how to work on this software. That's not something that they're going to need to do. You're going to want to focus on okay, the clinical team needs to know this, because this is a direct relation of what they're working on. So they're probably going to be in your first immediate bullseye. Maybe just outside of that, you might find, pharmacovigilance, or you might find regulatory, because you need to make sure that, there's certain components that are compliant and so on. So you start to see, and that's also kind of the rate that organically it happens. If you think about a ripple in the middle of a lake, that first drop, that's when everybody is going to be using it from day one. And then those little ripples are kind of just over time what population of your organization starts to use it. So it's important to consider those, especially in those early conversations, because we like to think that our work in our department is so unique, no one understands. When realistically, all of these organizations now, all of these biotech and pharma companies, they're all matrixed. Anything that you make a decision on affects 5 or 6 other departments. So until you start to really think about that from the start, the implementation of these is going to become so painful because no one's going to know what you're talking about. Hey, I just got an email. What is this training about? I go talk to people. Hey, I'm thinking about doing this. I'm looking at, different companies, checking out various software. What do you think? What do you think we need to focus on? Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, I typically have a problem in this space. Well, now you have a new piece of information, not from a direct stakeholder, but from the next node of people that you can think of, okay, so this isn't, priority number one, but it's a priority to make sure that I can get this group on board later on.
We'll be right back after a quick break.
Do you suspect your life sciences company could do things more efficiently? Maybe you're seeing costly workflow issues, or maybe the work feels more difficult to perform than necessary, affecting team morale. If any of this resonates, reach out to the team at Sigma Lab Consulting for a free consultation on how we can develop and launch a custom solution fit for your team. Our consultants will build a custom workflow solution for your team to reach peak efficiency. Find out more at www.sigmalabconsulting.com.
Yeah, I mean, to that end, do you think we're ready for this digital transformation in the industry?
I mean, there's so much that's coming out. They say technology doubles every year or something like that. And I mean, just look at the phones that come out, and every year you have something with, like, there's new cameras, or it's faster, or there's the screens are better and tighter. And I think we should be comfortable with understanding that the digital transformation that may occur in our organization could be as soon as every 2 to 3 years. I would say every 5 years you should probably, in larger organizations, I understand there's an expense, but I would suggest every 5 years that you take a look and say, where are our assets? What's out there now? Does it make sense to change? Because things are advancing, and some organizations advance at different rates than others. Some software is developed at different rates than others. So you need to take a good look and see, not just, and this is kind of what happens with those that are so content with the status quo. Don't look at your organization as, is this, this is fine, right? This is fine. That's you shouldn't be looking at your organization as this is fine. You should be looking at it as, is this software sufficient enough to keep us in the running to be one of the top companies in our space? Because while you're just kind of using this, Microsoft Windows 95, somebody's out there in your same space really advancing their services, their technology, and just really trying to make a big splash with their product. So how can we be prepared for that kind of stuff? We have to make sure that we are constantly looking at what we have in our digital asset portfolio toolkit, whatever you want to call it, and understand what's missing. And it's okay to have things that, it'd be nice if we could, transform this data into this over here. Sometimes that technology is just not even available at this point. But as long as you keep that mentality, you're constantly looking to improve the systems that you guys have. And, what's important to also know is that user adoption and user experience is becoming ever more important. The interface that people are working with is becoming ever more important, because in a way, you don't want the barrier for entry for a new client to be this Mount Everest hurdle that they're trying to go over. You start looking at now in these, I guess, spreadsheet type of software, they're flourishing. Why? Because everybody came from using Microsoft Excel. So why am I going to change drastically how everybody can see things? I want the functionality to be 100% different, but I need to make it easy so that people can understand columns and rows and be able to take that data and transpose it to create graphs, to send it out to, Power BI, to send it out to Tableau, whatever the case may be. But, to reinvent how we view these technologies, it becomes ever more of a hurdle for adoption within organizations. And so, it's something that I think the vendor side can also take into consideration. There's a lot for us to do. We have to be comfortable with change. We have to be comfortable with improving, because that's ultimately what we want to do. No one wants to go to work and watch the company fail. We're all trying to work toward the same goal. So,
but I actually thought that we are ready, but I think it depends on who is in charge of implementing the technology. I think there are people out there that are very similar to us, where we have become highly efficient by using the tools that are at our disposal. But if you give a person like us a new tool where we can like even become more efficient, I think that increases our productivity like exponentially. But at the same time, it's not just about us, being more productive. It's about the entire team and being able to bring them along with you, and to create these like new interactions that you can use to optimize your process. So I think we are ready, but it depends on who we're giving the keys to the car to.
So it's almost like you're seeing like a generational shift in who accepts this technology. And, I think that's a very good point, and something that you can see across a lot of industries of, I was just talking to my wife's cousin just last week, and he was mentioning that in his work that he does, he actually does a lot of moving and of assets for biotech and pharma. And he mentioned that in his field, there are, a small group of folks in their 30s. I think he's around 25. So he's like one of the young ones. And then everyone else has been working in this space for like 50 years. It's like, so, every once in a while we get messages of, hey, how do I do this in my Outlook? And it's very standard things. And, I think it's a little bit of that fear of, is this technology going to be way above my head, or I'm at this part of my career, do I need to really embrace a new technology? And, the answer is yeah. If you want to still play the game, if you want to still be a part of these organizations that are advancing medicines at rates that we never expected before, the only way to do that is going to be through technology, because as we've learned time and time again, having an FTE being the main asset, for you want to squeeze every ounce of productivity out of that 8-hour day, 6-hour day, 7.5-hour day, 4 or 5 day work week, whatever that is. But in order to do that, you do need to embrace that technology so that you can be efficient and be productive and have these turnaround times that are nothing like, they were before. Obviously we're still going to have the number of manual, entries, because the data has to come from somewhere. A lot of times, this is something that I hear all the time. Oh, so people are still entering the data. Sure. You enter the data one time, and then this is everything that you end up getting on the other side, rather than this person updates, then they send an email, then that person does something, then they send that to someone, then they do something, and then they have a computer that does something else. It's like now you're involving 3 FTEs for a process that this new software can do with just 1 FTE. So it's being able to think about that and having, I employ all people that have been in their organizations for years. There's got to be something that you don't like, something that you're always left at the very end. Now we have to spend 2 weeks to do this one task. How much is that 2 weeks worth?
It sounds like there were a lot of people that really found a lot of value in the conversation that you had. And there were a bunch of people that were attending some other sessions as well.
Yeah, so this is the second year that I've done it. Last year, I presented with a panel, and I can't remember the topic of that one, but it had to do with, moving into the clinical trial space with COVID. What is that forcing us to do? What can we do to be prepared? Something similar. So I've enjoyed this. It's a local conference, so it obviously makes it very easy. And, over the last 2 years, I've seen the attendance go up, and I've also run into a lot more people. So it looks like the spread is getting higher. I had someone come to me afterwards and was talking about how they wanted to implement a new solution. And when I was sort of kind of telling her my structure for how I go about these things, when I said it's important to look at these secondary stakeholders and ask, what they think, where they are in their function, she had told me, well, I already know what the problem is. And that can be somewhat dangerous because although we may understand what the problem is, we're only looking through one lens. We have to look at everyone else's problem as well, because we may look at it as, well, this problem is an Excel sheet, and, they want it as a PDF. So that's a problem that, we have to turn it into a PDF. And then you go talk to the other department and they go, yeah, we keep getting this as a PDF and we just need it as an Excel. Because people typically just don't talk to each other about these things. They just say, oh, okay, when I come in, I learn, I get trained. That's what I do. And then I don't ask questions. And the one thing that I would say is that you will become smarter the more questions you ask, the more people you ask those questions to on how to implement these digital solutions. So, the conference was really great. It's in October, and somehow the last 2 years it has landed on like a 65, 70 degree day. So it's been really great to attend. And, I'm sure that I'll probably be involved in that in the future. And you see how these digital technologies have worked in other spaces for other organizations. And it's not to go in there and say, okay, well, I need to buy one of these now that I'm here to shop. It's to also understand what is out there, because you may not need it now. And that's the one thing that we have to get over ourselves of, is this help me now? No, because people take that into, for example, networking. Is this person going to help me now? Well, I don't need to network with them. You have no idea. There's no way, there's no ability for us to predict in the future what technologies we may need, what relationships we may want to have. So it's so important to really attend these conferences, understand what is that next level of technology for, in this case, clinical trials. It may not be a new CRO, but it may be a new software that can do some things that can answer the questions you're looking for. And like I said before, no one knows your organization more than you do. So you have to be the force into saying, yes, this is what we need. No, this is not what we need. Because the vendor is only going to be able to recommend you something based on what they have available. You have to do the homework to say whether or not that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think attending these conferences, you learn about what other people are doing at their own companies, obviously what new technologies vendors are coming out with, but also what mistakes not to make by just talking to people that are at the conference that may or may not have a similar experience to you, or they may have tips about, their journey about how you should approach technologies like what you mentioned. And I'm glad that you went, and it sounds like you had a great time, and maybe you'll definitely be there next year, it sounds like.
Yeah, if I get the invitation, then I'll definitely really enjoy talking with people and meeting with folks and, helping them think through these things, because it's really these, not everyone's going to be able to invent something new, some new technology, but we can all innovate. And I think the majority of the folks that are there that attend these types of talks, they're the innovators in their companies that they're trying to understand the best way to move forward. And I'm not going to lie, it's not something that's easy. It's not something that takes, 2 weeks to accomplish. But when you have that executive sponsor, when you own that champion level knowledge of that software, of that platform, and you see the changes, it spreads. And it spreads like, I like to say it spreads like a virus. Maybe not that fast, but it will.
All right. Well, we'll see everybody on the next one.
All right. Take care.
Thanks for listening, and if you're interested in being a guest on our show, send us a message at leanbydesign@sigmalabconsulting.com. You've been listening to the Lean by Design podcast. Music is by Alex Grohl and Anton Vlasov of Pixabay. The show is produced by Michelle Gonzalez and hosted by Oscar Gonzalez and Lawrence Wong of Sigma Lab Consulting. Until next time, work smarter before you work harder.